So welcome everyone, if I can just formally welcome you. Thank you very much for turning up to this, which is the public launch of GAVE, the Global Alliance for Values-Based Education. It's an exciting occasion for us to be seeing you, and hopefully we'll be able to tell you some interesting things about GAVE, what we're up to, and who we are really, and what our aims are as we go through the coming hour. I'm Charles Fowler. I'm going to be your host or moderator for this discussion today with Shagufta Kapadia, Professor Kapadia from University of Baroda, India. We're going to just briefly introduce proceedings. I'm still letting people in, hold on. We're going to briefly introduce proceedings and then hand over to a series of speakers, which Shagufta will talk about in a minute. Just to very briefly introduce me, I'm Charles Fowler. I'm the chair of the Human Values Foundation, which I have been chairing for the last 20 or so years. The Human Values Foundation is a values-based educator, a charity based in the UK, which has been promoting programs of values education for some 30 years now, in fact, exactly 30 years now. I'm also the global coordinator of World Values Day, which happened last month, which some of you were involved with, and I'm the chair-elect of GAVE. I'll be chair for next year, for 2026. That's really me. Just before I hand over to Shagufta, I should say once more to you all, do use the chat, but while we have speakers, we're not going to stop for questions and answers after each speaker, but there'll be plenty of time at the end. So in the meantime, do feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat, and we'll hopefully deal with them a little bit later. So I'm going to just turn over to Shagufta, just to introduce yourself and this session.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome everybody to this event that we've been looking forward to for a long time now. I'm Shagufta Kapadia. I bring greetings not just from GAVE, but also namaste from India. As Charles mentioned, I am emeritus professor in human development, and I've studied and learned and taught human development all my life. And I see GAVE as a space to connect the science of human growth with the art of nurturing values that give meaning to life. So I think it's just organically linked to human development. Just a word about today's event. So the session will offer an overview of the genesis of GAVE, its vision and values, and highlight the lessons learned from 3 decades of experience in values-based education. Toward the end, we shall have an open forum on why we need GAVE and what GAVE can do. And as Charles mentioned, let me just reiterate, we request all participants to please defer your comments and questions for later. So we are having an open forum session at the end, and you may also note the same in the chat. So we look forward to the interactions, but let's just defer it to the end. So thank you. Over to you, Charles.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shagufta. We're now going to hear from several different speakers who will give you some understanding, hopefully, of the genesis, the origin of GAVE, and what we're up to, what our vision is, what the backgrounds of some of us is as well, and generally sort of give you as much of a briefing as we can on what we've been doing. We've actually been working for exactly 3 years. I should say before I hand over to the first speaker that this is, I think, exactly 3 years to the day since GAVE was founded. So those 3 years have been spent in doing a lot of preparatory work of various kinds, and some of which you'll hear about, and some of which we can fill you in on later. But to really give a little bit of a better introduction to GAVE, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Thomas Nielsen, who is, I hope here, have we got Thomas here? Yes, there you are. Sorry, Thomas. The screen is crowded. Thomas, just to give you a quick introduction to Thomas, he's the Associate Professor of Education at the University of Canberra in Australia and has taught undergraduates and graduates uh, teachers for over 20 years. He's been serving on various Australian government funded initiatives to do with values and well-being, and won various awards for his research-led teaching. Thomas, over to you. I should say also, most importantly, of course, Thomas is the chair this year of GAVE. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you so much, Charles. Can you all hear me? A thumbs up, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much. So I decided to take a little bit of a philosophical spin for my 5 minutes of sharing with you today, because I know that there are some others who are going to talk a little bit more about the sort of organizational and practical happenings that created GAVE and has given us the momentum that you see today. And the way that I'm going to do it is just talk a little bit about how I have seen the need for values in my own work and how it's guided my own work together with my close colleague, Jennifer Ma, who's, by the way, sitting here next to me and is on the call as well, even though she's not on her computer. One of the things that I was very aware of already back in the early 2000s when I was part of the values education project in Australia, led by people like Terry Lowett and Ron Toomey. One of the things I was very aware of already then was how important values is. I already knew what we were finding, of course, in that study, that relationships is key to everything in teaching. And it's hard really to have children happy learning if they're not happy being there and not happy with their teachers and not happy with their peers. And all this, of course, as many of you will know, it's so obvious in a way that we sometimes wonder why we have to fight so hard to create an organizational unit for the first time here, sort of internationally. But already then it's pretty obvious that that there's something around values that are absolutely generic to our human consciousness, our human beingness, our human flourishing, our human potential. And so in my work together with Jennifer, we really investigated sort of what is it, what's a way that we can justify this other than all the other ways that many people are finding evidence that relationships and that respect and that caring is really the key to education. And that, surprise, surprise, will also improve the academic outcomes and the academic diligence in students. And so we've been, for the last 10 years, we've been on a journey of trying to find out what is really the underpinnings of well-being and happiness. Because if we can situate it in perhaps health and well-being and happiness, things that all people usually can agree on is important to them, then maybe that's another avenue of justifying how just important GAVE is. And so we have investigated and found that some very simple things that might, be intuitive to many of you, but might be interesting to know that we're sort of slowly trying to create an evidence base of. And that is, for example, that there is, roughly speaking, two types of happiness in the world. Yes, there are. You can divide it into many things, and semantically you can call it many different things, but roughly speaking, they are always to do with either something to do with pleasure or something to do with meaning. And then everything seems to be able to fit into those two categories. And these are not dualities, because you can have plenty of pleasure and you can have plenty of meaning at the same time. But what we know now from research, which is quite clear, looking at several people's research, across disciplines even, positive psychology research and medical health research, quite clear that if you only or primarily have pleasurable happiness in the world, you're very susceptible to going up and down, all depending on whether you're eating the ice cream or not. You're also much more susceptible not to recuperate quick from trauma, stress, and adversity in life. Whereas if you have meaning in your life, that seems to be the key for all people. If you have meaning in your life, you can have pleasure, plenty of pleasure and happiness through that. But it seems to also give you that resilience where you recuperate quicker from stress, adversity, and trauma. So suddenly, there's something to do with meaning. And then, of course, the million-dollar question is, well, what about the fact that meaning is a million things to a million people? And that is true in some way. But if you look at the research worldwide, it's really, really interesting because there seems to be one common denominator for what people say is meaningful all over the world. And you probably guessed it, it is being something for someone or something other than just yourself. In other words, some sort of giving, some sort of contributing beyond yourself. In other words, perhaps the value around which all values revolve. Because one of the ways that we define giving is that it's kind of pretty much any positive emotion or action. It doesn't have to be just an action, but any kind of positive emotion or thought that you can either give towards yourself or others or the universe, or it doesn't really matter because it seems to create the same health benefits. You tend to live longer, you tend to have less illness, you tend to recuperate quicker. It's one of the strongest predictors of increasing your health and your happiness the most dramatically is to be giving something to someone or to something beyond yourself. And that to me then suddenly now we suddenly have some evidence, not from a purely moral perspective, because of course, in many ways, I'm very happy to have philosophical discussions about the necessity of morality. But of course, we know that there are many people in the world that are not so eager to have those conversations and think that morality is very contextual and very relative. But what it's hard to argue against is health and well-being. So if you're suddenly situated in the argument that if it's wise to do something that's healthy for not just yourself, but also your surroundings and your environment and the collective in which we find ourselves, we suddenly have a health and very well-being imperative for valuing values, because that is actually what gives us the meaning in life. And so this and many more things are things we are struggling with every day in our research and things I'm teaching my teachers at the university. But it all comes back to the reason of why I think GAVE is so important and why we need to have GAVE, because we can come at it from many ideological perspective, and that's all fine. But I think one of the things that's going to unite GAVE in the future is that we all committed to research, we all committed to the evidence around why the values are important. It's not just a moral imperative, it becomes a health and well-being imperative for not just ourselves, but for the world, which, of course, as you all know, is in dire need of more well-being and more harmony and more balance and more giving and more contributing to each other, and thus more meaning. There's probably one I want to say it in terms of my way of highlighting how important it is why we are connected and why we are here today. And of course, it's many of this type of research and discussions with colleagues that have brought me into contact with many of you, and that has brought many of us together. This intent of trying to persuade the world in gentle, in evidence-based, in evidence-informed, in logical, in reasonable, in humanistic ways towards an understanding and a valuing of values-based education.
Love it. Thank you very much indeed, Thomas.
You're welcome.
That's brilliant introduction. Thank you so much. I'll just hand over now to Shagufa to
thank you. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Thomas, for that inspirational and so relatable introduction. You highlighted the value of connection and giving, which really bring true inner happiness. Thank you so much for that. We now turn to Craig Sheely. So Craig, hello. And over the past 3 years, Craig has worked with us on the organizational structures and systems of GAVE and is in a good position to offer perspective on why GAVE happened. So over to you, Craig.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Am I unmuted and all that? Great. Okay. Well, delighted to see everybody here. As Charles said, this public launch has been a long time coming, and with appreciation to Charles and Shakufa for hosting us, I'm delighted to be here with you all. So, in terms of why GAVE happened, I know from our experience and from countless meetings, projects, discussions over the years, the biggest problem we values-based educators, scholars, practitioners, students, and leaders have is we don't have an international, interdisciplinary, and member-driven professional organization for us all, which is focused on values and values-based education, research, and practice. We pay a price for not being organized. First, we lose the opportunity to influence pedagogies, programs, and policies. And second, we aren't learning from and helping each other. We end up doing what we do in relative isolation from one another with limited ability to scale up our work exponentially by coming together. These are among the fundamental reasons we need the Global Alliance for Values-Based Education. Certainly, there have been leading lights among many others, including those in this meeting. We could note the indispensable work of Terry Lovat, Ron Toomey, Thomas Nielsen, and the Australian Values Education Initiative and Handbook, now in its second edition. The work of Neil Hawkes, a pioneer in the field of VBE, who has been doing this work as long as anyone. Charles Fowler, leading the remarkable World Values Day Initiative, now in its 10th year. Nazreen Dasu, UNESCO Values Education Chair. Stellar researchers like Shagufa Kapadia, Chris Atchison, and Jennifer Ma, and Ron and Sawanti Farmer, without whom we likely wouldn't be convening here now. For they and their 2022 conference in Australia on Education with the Heart are responsible for giving inspiration to GAVE. The best part of this process over the past 3 years has been talking with so many of you all over the world who are doing extraordinary work on values, broadly defined. Many of you are old and now new friends, colleagues, and collaborators. From hundreds of dialogues and sources of input now, I know there is a deep and wide consensus that we need this organization to learn who each other is, what each other is doing, and to serve as multipliers for one another and catalyzers of our values-based work and aspirations. In doing so, as our bylaws specify, and the Charter Steering Committee of GAVE has been very clear on this point over the past 3 years, GAVE needs to be owned by no one and belong to everyone. This member-driven organization flows from the ground up through 7 dynamic committees who pick their own leaders, and then the committee leaders pick the leaders of GAVE, and we all work together on the steering committee, which is designed to be responsive to our members and all they wish to pursue. So here is our chance. Join GAVE. I am the interim membership chair of GAVE. I can see we're getting a good response so far. If you have not yet signed up for GAVE as a member, please do so. Let's make this happen. Get involved. The foundational infrastructure is built. Let's create an organization for all of us to get our extraordinary work out there. As Thomas just indicated, it clearly is more needed than ever around the world, not only in schools, of course, but in organizations and systems in our communities, through our research, through grants, through policy work, and international convenings that we hold together. Along the way, I suggest we avoid getting distracted by the daily noise all around us and focus with persistence and clarity on what we know deeply and do well all over the world as scholars, educators, practitioners, students, and leaders. Our values-based work is integral to helping humans learn, grow, and develop in ways that are aware, compassionate, and able to handle complexity and self, others, in the larger world. We have enormous promise and potential, and I look forward to seeing all we can do and be through GAVE in the months and years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. Well done. That's I think we're beginning to, convey an idea of what GAVE is about in this short space of time. And I'm sorry for restricting our wonderful speakers to such short bursts of talking, but we're going to move on now to just hearing from Ron and Sawanti, who both other speakers have mentioned. Ron and Sawanti are actually here today, but this is Ron and Sawanti Farmer, who are at the moment in India and have recorded a video for us in case they weren't going to be able to join us. But I think what we'll do Ron and Sue, with your permission, is to show the video after just giving a brief, a little introduction to you both, because as Craig just said, we wouldn't be here really without Ron and Suwanti. It was their vision and inspiration that led them to convene a conference 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, which led to the formation of this entity, this new entity, bringing together lots of wonderful people from around the world in the field of values education, broadly stated. Ron his background is in clinical psychology. He trained the first practitioners of CBT and behavior modification in Australia. Ron and Suwanti, who also has a similar background, conduct workshops in values education, have done so for many, many years. I think probably Ron and Suwanti about 30 years or possibly more, helping teachers and parents undergo personal transformation to become good role models for the children they care for, such an essential factor. And they founded this wonderful school, Tugulawa School in Australia, which provides and has provided for 25 years free full-time values education for boys whose behavior has made them unwelcome in the mainstream system, with huge success. So I'm now going to, if that's okay, Ron and Suwanti, share a video which you recorded earlier. And I'm sure once we've done that, we can, let me just get that on the, if I can, onto the big screen. Hold on. There we go.
My name is Ron Farnham, and my wife Suwanti. Suwanti is
Sorry, the volume isn't too great on that. Let me just turn that up.
The fact that the people who in publications were referring to the heart, there didn't seem to be any coalescing of coming together of that. So Suwanti had this idea that we should have an international conference, so these like-minded, amazing people could all come together.
We both have been involved in value-based education since 1986. We strongly felt that it was time for all of us to come together to highlight how vital it is for the heart to be brought back into education. We did the summit in November 2022 on value-based education, at which eminent speakers gave their uplifting and heartwarming talks of embracing education with the heart. The summit was a resounding success, giving us all great hope for the future of value-based education.
When we look at education worldwide, we see that the focus is almost entirely upon academic performance. But what this means is that we run a big risk of graduating clever scoundrels, that so many people who've come through the education system really don't have much of a moral compass. We need clever people for sure, but we don't need clever people who don't have a conscience. From the beginning, we've always felt what's lacking in the school system, any focus on spirituality. Certainly there are religious-based schools, but they tend to focus on one religion. And we felt that what the world needed was citizens who could recognise that all roads lead to Rome. The language we've tried to use is one which is acceptable not only to all faiths, but also to agnostics and atheists, so that nobody's left out, but we're really all on the same road. Most people are open to the idea of some form of higher intelligence which is organising and running the world. You can call it God or a higher intelligence or something is behind all of this. We don't have to get hung up on the language. Something is making this happen. Something's organising all of that. It's not just an accident. And there's a saying that says the stars shine brightest on the darkest of nights. The education system in most countries in the world, it's lost its moral and spiritual direction. And so GAVE is in a position to provide this. And I think people worldwide are ready for it. The teachers have to recognise that their responsibility is to engage in an ongoing self-transformation so they become truly loving beings. And every child in their class feels deeply loved. One of the things I say to them, look, inside you is a diamond. And this diamond's covered with mud. Mud is your anger, sadness, depression, your fear of other people. We're the people going to help you wash away the mud. We can no longer depend just upon the parents to do this. And if this is the foundation of education, all else will go well. As the teacher changes, the children will change. It only takes one person with a blazing light to lead the way, and everybody else can follow.
That's our hope with GAVE. We started with a summit with the title Embracing Education with the Heart. And that's the role that GAVE is going to play. With courage, focus, with open heart, and look for the good in everyone to make the world a better place, not for ourselves, but for everyone as a family, as one family.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ron and Suanti. That was indeed deeply inspiring. It was heartwarming, and I'm just so happy that we have GAVE, for listening to the both of you. So thank you so much for that. We now turn to Nazreen Dasu. So I invite Nazreen to give her views. Nazreen Dasu is a UNESCO chair in values education and the past chair of GAVE. And currently she heads the Department of Education and Curriculum Studies at the University of Johannesburg. So over to you, Nazreen.
Thank you, Shagufa, and good morning to everyone who's taken their time from very busy lives to join us on this fabulous launch of the Global Alliance in Values Education. So my brief is to talk about what GAVE gives the world. For too long, values education has been considered a secondary concern, or in some instances, simply a matter of opinion. Values are not a soft skill. Instead, they are fundamental for a well-functioning society and thriving individuals within it. The core values of empathy, integrity, respect, and shared sense of humanity are a deficit we see in the world today. We are a collaborative hub that brings together educators, policymakers, researchers, and community leaders around the globe. GAVE offers the world four things. More, I would think, but for me, four major things. Firstly, a powerful platform for values education advocacy. In a clear, unified voice, we can insist that values education is not an optional extra. It is essential to 21st century learning and deserves the support and funding to be at the heart of every curriculum, from kindergarten to higher education. Secondly, it is a global resource hub. We aim to grow a repository of the world's best practices in values education. Thirdly, we aim to offer the world evidence-based research and frameworks that support the impact values education has on academic achievement, mental well-being, and social cohesion. And the fourth pillar for me is that we are a vibrant community of practice. Our website bears testimony to our efforts in breaking down silos by fostering a global exchange of ideas and support for all who belong to GAVE. So welcome to all of those who have registered to our GAVE family. Thank you, Shagrufa.
Thank you so much, Nasreen. That's amazing to hear, because the vision that we have is really to make a huge difference over time to education in the world. And I think Nasreen and the other speakers are reflecting that so powerfully. I'd now like to turn to and introduce two people who've done as much as anyone to bring the research side of values education to the forefront in their work in Australia. And first, I'd like to introduce Professor Terry Lovett, who can't be with us today, but he's recorded a brief clip for us, which I'm going to share in a minute. And then I'm going to ask Ron Toomey, who was also closely involved in a lot of that work and a lot more work on values education, to speak after that. But first, if I may, I'm going to share this message from Terry Lovett. And just before I do so, just say a couple of words on Terry Lovett. He is currently Emeritus Professor at the University of Newcastle, and a visiting professor and UNESCO Utuin partner at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa, where Nasreen is, honorary research fellow at the University of Oxford, and many other visiting professorships and adjunct professorships too. He has been researching values education for 20 years or more, I think rather more than that. And notably, he was chief investigator of research and practice projects for the Australian Values Education Programme, which, as many of you already know, probably most of you already know, and you're going to hear a bit more about it in a minute from Terry and from Ron, was running from 2003 to 2010 with huge success in Australia, and then sadly abandoned. So I'm going to share the screen with you. Let me just get that up. Hopefully everyone's seeing that. Let me just get it on full screen and full sound. Here we are. Good.
I think there's lots wrong, but just focusing on one thing that I think is enlightening. Fred Newman from Wisconsin, in his research, concluded that the school could have the most highly qualified staff, the best resources, the most robust policies, aims, goals, directives. But if students didn't feel cared for, safe, secure, and trusting of their teachers, then something invariably went wrong. The same message came through in a research study into over 300,000 students being asked what mattered to them most about their teachers. Number one was that their teachers cared about them. Two, they trusted their teachers. Three, their teachers made teaching interesting. And four, their teachers were organised and had good control. Modern educational neuroscience shows the importance of having the brain in the right emotional space, safe, secure and caring space. But what do we tend to get from education systems worldwide? All the talk is about performance, outcomes, testing, measuring, and standardise this and standardise that. Education's first and foremost about relationships, positive relationships. If we get that wrong, then something will go wrong, and it has. Stats on student disengagement, including school bullying, are worse than ever. Teacher burnout and attrition, you name it, we have a problem. My vision comes largely from my experience in the Australian Values Education Program. We prioritised the relationships between teacher and student, student and student, school staff and students, even the relationships between the school and parents and the wider community. We talked about the importance of respect, trust, care, responsibility, acceptance of difference, forgiveness, etc., etc. The language of values became part of school discourse, be it the signage on the street front, to the language the school principal would use in assembly, to the language used in behaviour management situations, and all the way through to the way curriculum content was unpicked in classroom learning, focusing on the value and relevance of the content, be it a theme in English literature, a discovery in science, whatever. Through this approach, schools became calmer places, safer, more secure, happier places. Teachers and students reported higher levels of well-being, social, emotional, personal. Reductions of things like teacher and student absenteeism, behaviour management issues, etc. Academic learning began to improve. Reports of students being more engaged, doing better work, having better discussions, teachers talking about their own pedagogy being more robust. It's not that academic learning is not important to those who promote a values pedagogy. It's a case of how to get there. Teacher education's a massive issue. Its history is of being more reactive than proactive. We started to do it in the later days of the values education program, courses forming within teacher education around the country. Sadly, the minute the values education program itself was wound down and out, those courses started to also wind down and out. I think most other professional programs do a better job than we do in education. The average medical education program ensures that student doctors are given the latest research and come into the profession with fresh ideas. I don't think enough of that happens in teacher education, but it should. It's a challenge to hold people together around some sort of vision when they're coming from different research traditions, but I think we'll be stronger if we can include rather than exclude. We've got a huge battle to wage. We can't afford to be divided unnecessarily.
Fantastic. That's, I think, very inspiring. Rather sad, actually, to hear about the end of the program in Australia, but it's an inspiration, I think, for us going forward. I'd like to now introduce Ron Toomey. Ron, as many of you will know, has been involved, as I mentioned a moment ago, in values education in all sorts of different ways for a very long time. He's emeritus professor at the moment from the College of Arts, Business Law and Education and IT at Victoria University in Melbourne in Australia. And as I was saying, for 20 years at least, his research has concentrated on values-based education. And he's been talking about it, addressing conferences all over the world, and generally being a tremendous encouragement to all of those of us in this field of values education. Ron, over to you.
In the 60s, I was a young secondary school social science teacher. I can still remember some of the things that we were required to teach, what the syllabus said we had to do. The causes of World War I, capital punishment, apartheid. When my 3GH class of, 48, 15 and 16-year-old boys arrived for their first lesson on the origins of World War I. I didn't spend much time talking about where Sarajevo was, or who Archduke Ferdinand was, or who he was married to, who Gavrilo Princip was, why he pulled the trigger, or what the Black Hand had to do with it. I didn't think that stuff was important. I thought the important thing was that those youngsters, those 48, 15-year-old 3GH boys, should be able to figure out how to find that stuff out for themselves. That didn't seem to be too difficult for me. The big job, I thought my big job, was to help them ask the right questions, to help them know which questions were better than others to ask about World War I, apartheid, capital punishment. That was big deal when I was teaching capital punishment. So as I say, I thought my job was to get them to wrestle with democratic values. I thought my job was to foster some social cohesion within the group, hopefully to get those 48 3GH boys to become active, informed and responsible participants in democratic life. I thought that was what it was all about. And in a nutshell, us young social science teachers in the 60s had been told that our job was to move them through Benjamin Bloom's cognitive and affective domains up through there. This was all the fashion at the time. And we had very few practical tools to help us with this. Lewis Raths was one. He was a devotee of John Dewey, and especially Dewey's views about valuing and how valuing was an active process and how it really involved inquiry and reflection. And he was, like my good friend Neil Hawkes, he was on about promoting humankind's flourishing. He took Dewey's theoretical framework of valuing and created a practical classroom-focused model to help students develop their own values through an active and reflective process he called values clarification. Now, I'd have to say that at best, what happened for me was very, very patchy. Those 48 boys would leave me in the humanities wing, they'd go over to the science wing, and somebody would have them, going on about the periodic table, and then they'd go over into the maths wing and they'd be into quadratic equations. And then when they got back to me on Thursday for their second double period, 50-minute double period, I spent maybe 40 minutes reminding them what we did on Monday. It was difficult. It was challenging. It was also challenging because you basically weren't allowed to teach values. I mean, teach them about World War I, but keep yourself out of it. Don't teach them values. That's not your job. So as I say, they were tough days. They were difficult days for me. Much later, I found myself working in that program that people have already started to talk about, the Australian government's values education program in the early 2000s. And that's when I saw how teaching could really and truly help mankind flourish. The project was assigned nearly $30 million in the 2004 Australian government's budget, and 150 schools and literally thousands of teachers had that money to beaver away in a ground-up sense to show us all what the real McCoy was as far as values education was concerned. I fell on my feet. I found myself as the research manager of that project. So on a day-to-day basis for years, I was in the thick of it. I was just watching people literally perform miracles. The project kicked off on May the 16th, 2005 in Gandel Hall at the Australian National Gallery with an address by my friend Terry Lovett. The address was called Values Education and Teachers' Work, a quality teaching perspective. Basically, Terry said that, look, if you explicitly teach values as a central part of the school program, everything else will fall out. It'll produce quality teaching. It will be a winner. And the people in the room, 400 or more key teaching people from around the world, listened to that, and they were then what's the right word? It was suggested to them that they should go forth and show us how to do this. And over the next 4 or 5 years, I was deeply immersed in that work and watched wide-eyed as students became more caring of themselves, became more caring of their classmates, liked their teacher more. Teachers began to let go of old ways of doing stuff. Students became deeper thinkers. Teacher morale blossomed. Now, how was all that different to what I was doing in the 60s? Well, let me tell you, these were the distinguishing characteristics of what all these people were doing. The first thing that is really important here is that they were explicitly teaching values. The school community got together, they identified their common core values, and teachers explicitly teach them. They hammered them home. The second thing they did was they abandoned those silos. The kids didn't go from my humanities wing to science to maths. All of that was weaved together through the values. And the third thing, and this I think from my perspective, this is the critical bit. People, teachers worked together, collaborated in an action research environment to do their very best. We wrote a book about that, or we didn't write a book, we edited a book about that called Values Education, Quality Teaching, the Double Helix Effect, which basically has a series of case studies about how they did what I've just described. And over the last 20 years, many people have picked that up and run with it. Our next book, which is literally, I've read the proofs of it today, Values-Based Instructional Scaffolds, talks about a whole lot of additional ways teachers are doing this sort of thing. Now, 3 years ago at Ron and Sawanti's conference, I was happy enough to agree to be part of the establishment of GAVE, which we're launching today, because I thought it might become a meeting place for teachers with a commitment to working in the ways that I've just described. Given all the good work by Craig, Nazreen, Thomas, Jen, and many others, many of whom are in the meeting, I hope GAVE becomes more than just a meeting place for people with like minds. I think a really important part of it becomes a place where teachers come together in the way that I've just described, and they collaborate, they share with each other ways of doing this stuff, and we at GAVE help that process. Am I done? Well, I'm pretty much done, except I think if we can manage to pull that off, there's a chance the world might become a better place. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Ron. That's a great call to action, I think, for all of us. We're going to open this up actually because you've heard a bit from a variety of the people behind GAVE, all the people that not all the people, but a lot of the key people who set it up, from their own different points of view, giving different aspects of what we're doing. We're not covering, the whole ground. We haven't said much about the structure of GAVE, although we could perhaps say a little bit more in response to any questions. But it would be good to give you an opportunity to, of course, ask questions, but also make comments. I think if I just ask you not to introduce yourself at length, if you want to say who you are, that's great, just one sentence. But if you want to introduce yourself more extensively, then please put it in the chat because we are a little bit short of time. So I think we have got one question we might start off with, which is from Brenda Dobia, asking about whether there's been any thought about the links that GAVE should or might have to global citizenship and sustainability education. And Nasreen, I see you've already replied lots in the chat. So I don't know, Nasreen, whether you would like to just expand on that.
But I think it's important that I do, and I do it from a UNESCO perspective. And I've spoken about a lot about it in our meetings, and Craig will bear witness to this, is that at the UNESCO meetings that I've attended, and I've been very much part of the work being done in global citizenship now. In fact, we've reimagined a lot of our own UNESCO work in values education and started incorporating global citizenship, where we have a fully fledged accredited program in global citizenship and values education. And I attend a lot of the global citizenship education meetings at UNESCO and outside, Paris itself and outside Paris. But what pained me the most when I sat in those meetings is that values education or values-based education is starting to disappear from the discourse. And that is worrisome, because for a lot of us here, global citizenship is a value. And if values education doesn't start showing up, dressing up and showing up, and has a strong voice, we are going to be, will disappear into the background. And global citizenship already is SDG 4.7. It's in the policy. It's in the Sustainable Development Goals. It's being very, very forcefully promoted across the globe. And values is starting to, just disappear. So I think it's important that GAVE now, as a fully fledged organization, starts speaking loudly about the work that we do in values education and how important it is, and not to overshadow global citizenship education, but to say that we work with global citizenship education. Hand in hand, they go together. And we can show you the evidence because we have a fully fledged program to show the evidence that it works very well together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nasreen. And Brenda, rather, I hope that answers your question, or at least goes some way to answering the question.
Yeah, that opens up a lovely discourse I'd like to pursue, but not right now.
Okay, there's lots of avenues for discourse, extensive discourse opening up, I think, all the way through. Who else would like to make a comment, or if you'd like to either raise your hand electronically or just put your hand up on the screen? Anyone like to ask a further question? Otherwise, I'll just ask one. Sue, are you? Yeah, Sue.
I'm really interested in the take-up of the membership of GAVE, Charles. How has it gone so far?
Craig, would you like to answer that? I mean, the answer is we haven't been pushing it until just the last week or two in the promotion around Values Day and then ahead of this session.
Yeah, right now, I just looked at this in anticipation of the meeting. We have about 40 people who've indicated that they want to be members of the group. That's a good start.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long, a minute or two. Just go into the website, fill out the form, and we will be in touch with you if you indicate what your interests are, we will help organize folks on the basis of those interests and be there to support the dialogue and processes. We meet again, Thomas, coming up in December, I believe. So we will revisit all that to kind of get the system moving forward. But I think the thing I would emphasize is that if you look at who is coming in as members, you think of the wonderful work of kind of the leaders of VBE, people like Ron and Terry, Ron and Sawanti, Neil Hawkes, etc. The sort of the spiritual core of VBE as it's traditionally understood. What's lovely is there's that emphasis for sure, which must be there, but it also is a lot of other people coming from all kinds of different disciplinary backgrounds. And I think that's going to be really key for this organization, is for people who don't see themselves as values-based educators, actually recognizing, my goodness, this is actually at the core of what I do in my discipline and in my profession. And part of our job as an organization is helping people who have moral or ethical interests, or they're involved in training or curriculum or credentialing, that kind of a thing, that a lot of what you're talking about are the values of your profession, and we're here to support you. So not only everybody here, but please reach out to your colleagues, your students. Let's take advantage of this, because it's really hard to pull these things off, and get together and make this happen, and create the kind of momentum we need. We're on our way, but we need to move past this critical point and see what we can do.
That was my next question, was how can we help to promote it? Yeah.
Sign up, encourage other people to get in there. Our job, at least as I see it on our side, is to line people up based on the interests that they have, and then to help facilitate the dialogue processes, getting clear on what we are as an organization, and mainly hearing from you in terms of what your interests are. So Charles is coming in as chair in 2026. The progression from Nazreen to Thomas to Charles, we've had excellent leadership along the way. I think in the next year, we will see a real flourishing and a taking off of this. But every one of you, please join and invite other people in. And if we hit that critical mass, I think the organization will be able to take off and achieve its potential.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that, Craig, if I may. There is such what we've discovered really in the last 2 or 3 years is that we've taken on such a big task, really, because we're looking at education very broadly, we're looking at values education very broadly, and as I think we must and we should, and it's just a huge area. It's a huge ambition, really, and we do need more people to really make that vision a reality. We've set up 6 committees. There's 7 in all that we want to set up. We've set up 6, but 2 or 3 of those are really not properly underway as yet, because we're just short with the current membership, the initial membership, which is I don't know, Craig, 20 or
we really have put kind of our membership on hold, honestly, in advance of this public launch right here. So honestly, this is the first real push we've done to try to get people on board right now, and it's good. We're heading in the right direction, but we need everybody to sign up and get other people on board.
Good. So any other anyone else want to either ask a question or make a comment? I'm just looking through everyone there. If not, then I'd ask one of my colleagues maybe to, just before we got we've got 0 time really before we wrap up, But if anyone would like to make a comment or ask a question, or any of my GAVE colleagues, current colleagues, would like to make any final observation before we wrap up, that would be great. Anyone got any thoughts, takeaways that we can take with us?
Charles, there are a couple comments that you may want to pay attention to. People are asking, what are the committees?
Yes.
If you go to the GAVE website, you'll see the bylaws. Look there under the committees. I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Ma for all of the wonderful work she did in helping get that website up and running as well. And if you want to know more, all of our emails are in the message that we went out as an invitation. You're welcome to write to any of us.
Okay.
And Charles, if I may just add something, I wanted to take off from what Craig was saying and what you reiterated, that, we really also in GAVE, we would like to bring into our fold also individuals and groups who may be operating outside the conventional academic realm and doing excellent values-based work on the ground. I mean, there are these non-government organizations who are really doing just this kind of work. So I think we also would like to connect with them. And let me take this opportunity to also share that, in the research committee, and I'm involved in that with Jen and, of course, Chris and others. So we are excited to introduce what we have called the blog project. And we invite members of GAVE to kind of contribute to this and this project. So we have these three major themes in terms of conceptualization and frameworks of values-based education, research approaches and methods, and best practices. And so anybody who is interested in contributing and writing a blog, please do so. And the details we'll put up very shortly on the GAVE website. So it'll be great to receive contributions from just everybody all over the world. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you
just
so
wanted
much.
to add that. Yeah.
And it might be helpful just to run through the committees, because we are, as Shagufa says, we're not just wanting to have people already involved in research already to join us, although that's very welcome indeed. We also want practitioners who are putting education into practice, both in the conventional education system and elsewhere, outside the educational system, in organizations, through NGOs, and so on. So we're looking for a broad spectrum of people, really, because it's a broad spectrum that we're trying to address, really. So the 7 standing committees will be research, which Shagufa has just mentioned, education, advancement, policy, where we're also seeking to, persuade governmental and intergovernmental bodies to adopt a more policy-based approach to their policymaking, communication, membership, and a conference committee. We are looking at having our first conference, probably not in 2026, but 2027 is our current thinking. We're just looking around for a suitable date and a suitable venue at the moment. So if any of those ring a bell, or even if they don't, do join us and find out what you can do. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd like all kinds of input, really, from anyone that this resonates with. Good. If there's, it looks as though we're all ready to wrap up. We have overrun a little bit for a few minutes, for which apologies, but thank you so much, almost all of you, for staying with us. And we do hope to see you again, and do get in touch. And also have a look at the website. Craig, can you give the website address?
Yeah, if you just Google gave.global, you'll find it. And if you get in touch with us, you join up as a member, we will be in touch with you. So we'll keep this conversation going and our process heading into 2026. And thank you to Charles and Shagufa and Thomas and everybody, Nazreen, everybody, Ron and Swanti, of course, and Ron Toomey, my buddy Ron, everybody for doing what you're doing to get us to this point. Thank you.